Here we are. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming. And of course, Michael Cunningham, thank you for coming. I don't think I need to introduce him to you guys, but I'll just do it for the sake of introduction. Michael Cunningham is best known for his Pulitzerprijs winning novel, The Hours, which also inspired an acclaimed film adaptation. And besides that, he has graduated from Stanford University and later received his MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop. And today you're a professor of creative writing at Brooklyn College in New York.
Well, at Yale.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Is that not correct anymore?
Hmm?
Is that not correct anymore?
It doesn't matter. Forget I said that.
Am I information wrong?
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Anyway, what I'm sure of is that your works include A Home at the End of the World, By Nightfall, and The Snow Queen, and we are here today to celebrate your newest release, Day, or in Dutch translation, Dag. And to get us started, I was wondering if you could tell us something about your newest book.
Sure. I must be extremely audible, right? Yeah, I can see people hair blowing back. Briefly, I was writing another book entirely when COVID hit, and I just thought, how can anybody write a novel, a contemporary novel, as if this wasn't happening? Because unlike other plagues and disasters, it was happening everywhere. Every single person on Earth. You couldn't set a novel in a place where it wasn't going on. It wasn't profoundly altering people's lives. So I realized that I couldn't really somehow work the pandemic into the novel I was working on. It would have felt forced. Like, here we are at this party, and oh, look, Godzilla. Who expected a 50-foot tall fire breathing reptile? So I put that one aside and started this book, and which immediately posed the question: how does anybody write a novel that sort of deals with the pandemic without being about the pandemic? Novels are not about viruses, right? They're about human beings. And I just sat for a while with the question about how do you write about human beings during a time like that, which sort of threatened to actually eradicate us as human beings. And I finally sort of hit on the structure of the book, which is it's a single day in the lives of this group of people, at morning, afternoon, and evening, but each of the three parts of the day is in different year. So morning is before the pandemic, afternoon is at the height of the pandemic, and evening is wherever we are now, which is not done. It would be disrespectful to call it the post-pandemic. We're not post-pandemic, but then again, here we are in ways we couldn't possibly have been a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my way of trying to keep the focus on the people as we sort of watch them either survive or not survive.
Is that also why? Because I noticed in the book, of course, COVID is this kind of thread running through it, but you never actually use the words COVID or pandemic. Is that also because you wanted to focus on the humans?
Yeah. And I actually think that when we name something, we domesticate it just a little tiny bit. Um, in ancient Greece and Rome, you would not say the name of the Lord of the underworld aloud because it was just too terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And that seemed true for this too. Yeah. I didn't. I just thought it's everyone's going to know what it is.
Yeah, yeah. And what was it like to write about the pandemic while it was unfolding? Like, did something significantly in the book change while circumstances were evolving?
I didn't really start it until it began to look until there was a vaccine and it began to look like many of us would not survive, but as a species we would survive. Um, because a novel, I think any novel, is a sort of missile without the war, without the military connotation. It's a projectile into the future. You're writing it for the future. It's as you're writing it, it's not anything. And if it looks like there might not be any future at all, why would you write a novel? Why not just do drugs and watch TV? So it was only when it looked like we were going to get through this, however damaged by it, that I began
Hmm.
to write.
Yeah. And I think, and you allude to it a little bit already now, that a lot of your work, and as you've pointed out in previous interviews, much of literature is about time and the passing of time. And I think for a lot of us, um, the way we perceived and experienced time during the pandemic kind of changed and shifted. And I think this is also noticeable in the book, in the second part, in 2020. Um, I noticed that it read a lot quicker, if that makes sense.
Mm,
I got through it a lot quicker.
yeah.
Partially also because of the formatting in the text messages and the emails, but I don't think it's just that. And do you agree? And
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, everybody's experience of the pandemic was their own, of course. But I think I felt, and I just think many of us felt that time passed simultaneously, really slowly and really quickly.
yes, yeah.
Right? Right, and it was a little paradoxical because you were just sort of nailed to that day that you had over and over and over again, and yeah, we all know, but I can't really explain it, but because we just know it seemed endless, and it also seemed because the days were so similar, but woof, wow, what day is it? What month is it? What year is it? So yeah, it really messed with I think, our collective sense of time.
Yeah, yeah. But it wasn't necessarily something you consciously wove into that second part.
Not so much. I mean, it's a story,
Mhm.
and I think you don't. I don't really do a lot of car chases or like
Mhm.
sex scenes. Not enough sex scenes really, but you do kind of want to keep it's about movement. It's about momentum. I don't think we read to escape our lives necessarily, but we do read, I think, to sort of be moved through
Yeah.
in ways that we don't always experience in our own lives.
Mm.
You know.
Yeah. And just to take it back to the humans a little bit more.
Sure.
Your book received a very, very positive raving review in the Dutch newspaper NRC,
I heard that.
where Rob van Essen states that who wrote the review states that one of the things that makes the novel so good is the way you write your characters, because you don't regard them with a sort of satirical view, but with you take them lovingly serious. And I very quickly translated that. So I hope it comes across. But do you agree with this observation?
Yes. I think it may have been F. Scott Fitzgerald, the American writer, who said that as a writer, you must not love your characters too much and not hate them at all. Right? So, because I teach a writing class, a literature class. In the writing class, every now and then, I will read a draft of a student's story and say, as gently as possible, so this is a story about people who aren't really worth writing a story about, right? And I mean, you can't sentimentalize these people, but fiction, as far as I know, is one of the best ways for all of us to understand what it's like to be somebody other than ourselves, right? I love movies, I love TV, and they're good at other things, but a good novel can really take you deeply into the life of another person. I may know Anna Karenina better than I know some of my friends.
Yeah, and I think that view that you have somehow makes that you write very, very well, saying it's realistic characters may be a little bit cliche, but you do really understand why they do what they do. And sometimes it makes it a little bit confrontational, because you realize that what they do is sometimes that things that we all do, maybe. And I think what makes the relationship between Robbie, Isabel, and Dan, which I think is a very, very interesting dynamic that they have. And a lot of what makes their dynamic interesting is that a lot between them is going on beneath the surface.
Yeah.
And they all kind of seem to agree that they all kind of know what's beneath there, but they don't talk about it. There is no open conflict at all. But it somehow merely simmers there, I would say. And what moved you to construct their relationship like?
Um, Robbie is the gay brother of a woman who is married to Dan, and Robbie and Dan, in their way, are very much a couple. But I think my sense of that particular relationship came out of a couple of things that I wanted not to do. I didn't want the gay guy to have some kind of terrible crush on the straight guy. I didn't want the straight guy to be sort of closeted. And I don't see enough in what I read about male friendship. We acknowledge women's friendships way much more than we do when than we do men's. And I mean, if Toni Morrison said, "Well, try to write the book you think is missing," and I don't know if that is this book, but I am really interested in the complicated affections that can arise among men. Partly because, like, I am gay, and I don't think it's not one of the 5 most important things about me. It might be one of those 10 most important things about me. And I don't have I don't have all gay friends, and I guess I just feel like rewriters who happen to be gay, and any writers, but really for me, it's just time to break out of gay, and just treat it as a fact of human life.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you accomplished that very, very well in this book because it's definitely there. But when describing this book, I would not say to someone, "Oh, it's about this gay brother," or and
Good. I'm
a
glad to hear
customer
that.
would ask me, "Oh, I'm looking for LGBTQIA literature." I don't think this would be the first book to pop into mind. It would eventually when I'm walking, but because it's definitely there. But I think it's very eloquently done.
Thank you.
Um, and then you said before, and I think it's very, very obvious in the hours and maybe a little bit less obvious in this book, but you've been influenced quite a lot by Virginia Woolf. I already heard it here before I said it out loud.
Yeah.
So there you go. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about her, what makes you to keep coming back, and how we maybe see that in this book.
Um, Virginia Woolf was simply the first great writer I read. I grew up in Los Angeles. I wasn't a very bookish kid. I really wanted to be a rock star, which I intended to pursue. I think really
Similar to Dan,
admirably.
then. Similar to Dan, then.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, and Dan is just the kind of failure I know I would have been. Because I was not daunted by the fact that I didn't have any talent. I just sort of wanted to wear leather pants and light my hair on fire. Um, and I guess I was 16, and I had attained the age of 16 without ever being moved by a book. Um, and to impress this older girl. This girl must exist everywhere, in every nation. The kind of beautiful, mean, smart girl whose older boyfriend picks her up in a hot car after school. We must know that girl, right? Um, and she, of course, was reading Virginia Woolf and T.S. Eliot, and I thought, well, maybe I could impress her if I could talk to
Mm.
her about Virginia Woolf or T.S. Eliot, and I went to the school library. There was only no Eliot. They only had one book by Virginia Woolf, which was Mrs. Dalloway. I was the only one who'd ever checked it out, and I can't say that I read it because I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't buy the flowers yourself. But what really just knocked me out in what proved to be a big lasting way was just that language, those sentences. I had never read language like that before. It's like I was sort of taken from my village where we danced the occasional polka, no disrespect to the polka, and taken to hear the Mozart Requiem. Like, what in the hell? Um, I didn't know you could do that with language. I remember thinking, oh, she was doing with language something sort of like what Jimi Hendrix does with a guitar. I'm one of the few people who insist on a connection between Virginia Woolf and Jimi Hendrix, but I stick to it. And I think we may use the word life changing a little too freely, but it really did change things for me. It I suddenly, and I bet we'd be great if we had time to talk about this among ourselves. I suspect many of us who read or care about books have a first book. It might be have been a children's book, but the first time that you understood what words on paper or on a computer screen could mean to you, and that was it. That was my first book, kind of like a first kiss. So Virginia Woolf would never have kissed me.
Probably not.
Not our type.
Now, we are here today in Rotterdam because your book has been translated into Dutch by Lucy van Rooyen and Inger Limburg, and it's also in the process of being translated into other languages. I think Danish and Spanish. I think.
Well, yeah, it's like 15 or so.
Well, that's very impressive.
Yeah. Well, and it's really fascinating. The two women who translated this together were great. And some translators want to talk to you about want questions and answered, and some don't. I'm fine either way. But we did. One of the things you learn when you talk to a translator is not only about sort of differences in language, like what resonance this word has in English that the Dutch version would not have, but also cultural, just differences in our cultures, even though we're all Western European. I know one of the questions was there are a couple of times when Robbie, the gay brother, calls Dan and their son Mary, which is an old gay thing, which is meant ironically by Robbie, and is something you would only say to straight guys. It's a kind of affectionate teasing, but okay, how do I explain Mary? And we did. We figured it out. But even like my last novel, the Finnish translator wanted to there are a couple of these two characters who are talking about their futures, and one of them says to the other, "Or we could just leave everything and drive out into the mad American night," which is from Kerouac. But for an American reader, you don't have to know who Kerouac was to get the whole idea that if it comes to that, you could just take your money out of the bank, buy a used car, and just drive into the continent, drive toward the lights on the horizon. And when I was talking to the Finnish translator, all I could think was, I bet you can't really drive out into the mad Finnish night. And if you did, it would not read as a similar gesture of sort of reckless romanticism. It would read as despair, because you would just drive through birch forests into the ocean.
Yeah.
So, things like that American sense of sort of unrealistic possibility. Yeah. And in cases like that, you say, do the best you can with that one. But I really, I'm afraid I'm going to blank on their names, but the women, I just want to pause to thank my Dutch translators who were fabulous. And we probably all know this, but translation is one of the least regarded, least well paid, crucial parts of the literary process. If asked, I always encourage my translators to take liberties, because I just know Dutch has cadences that would not work if in direct translation. And yeah, I am embarrassed to be blanking on their names, but
I have their names. I have them right here.
Would you?
Yeah, Lucy van Rooyen and Inger Limburg.
Nice. Thank you. Just a moment of praise for those two hard-working, underpaid, underestimated women who, like any good translators, sort of rewrite your book in another language.
Yeah.
It's a creative act.
It's wonderful.
It's not mechanical at all.
No, and I think a lot of people think that just you throw it into Google Translate and it says exactly in Dutch what it says in English, but there's so many intricacies and
Right.
it's a puzzle.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to see what you have to come up with sometimes.
Well, part of it, and I realized too, just working with translators, that the original, the thing I wrote, is already a sort of rough translation of the better book I had in mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that impossibly great book that no one could, never mind me, no one could write, because it reinvents language, and it has whale songs in it, and constellation, and so we're starting with a translation, really,
Yeah.
and then moving on to further translations.
Yeah, which I think is also what Dan says about songwriting, is that he has this idea of a sound or of a song, and he's just merely trying to find
Yeah,
a little bit of a grain from it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
stuff.
Well, if we're on the topic of phones, because I was also wondering about Instagram, because Instagram also plays a really interesting role in the book, because Isabel and Robbie, brother and sister, make up this alter ego on Instagram, and they post photos that if you were to look closely at the Instagram page, you would probably notice that this person doesn't exist and is constructed, or you would at least notice that something's not exactly.
Yeah.
And forgive me, but I also looked you up on Instagram,
Oh,
and I noticed that you don't necessarily use it in a traditional sense. So I wanted to ask, like, what is your view on Instagram, and how did that influence the book again?
I love Instagram,
Hmm.
and I haven't posted in quite a while, but yeah, I would take pictures of the sky and things
Yeah,
like that,
I noticed that it kind of looks like the English cover.
which is total coincidence.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That's funny.
yeah, yeah. I other forms of social media, not so much, but I love Instagram. The idea that you can have access to the lives of so many other, not only access, but a sense of how other people want you to see them. And part of what I do is, this is sort of like a slightly sick novelist thing. I follow X number of people and sort of try to get find my way to what I imagine their whole lives to be, apart from the pictures of their pets and their mothers, And I just love that. I love that. And so, yes, Robbie invents a person on Instagram, and what's interesting to me about that is that it's not just this invented person. This avatar is not some kind of superhero. Um, I think you should say he's more like a super ego. Um, he is Robbie's sense of an improved version of Robbie. He's a kind of like A plus doppelganger, more successful, more charismatic, has more sex, but are all things that Robbie wants for himself and feels he can't seem to quite get it. So let's invent somebody
Yeah,
who gets it,
yeah,
gets it all.
yeah. And then I think I have one last question to tie it all together a little bit. And maybe if there's someone from the audience who wants to ask a question, we can maybe do that. And my
So
last question would be, like, taking all these themes and things into consideration, what do you hope that the reader takes away from the book?
that's a good and difficult question.
Very
I
open, maybe.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I do hope people will be affected by a book, will be moved by a book. Will come away the way I guess I think about what I want as a reader, which is to feel like after I've read a novel I've really liked, I live in a slightly bigger world. I'm still in this world, but now I have that world also. And I mean, I think that is a sort of effort of literature,
Mhm.
is to give us access to more and more and more worlds as we continue to live in our own. And you never know, but I really hope that will will work in that way for
Yeah.
some people who read it.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I do think you really accomplished that because I think I really enjoyed reading the book, and I think it'll definitely stay with me. And what I liked is that it also makes you um, reflect a little bit on what COVID has done to us and to our relationships and how we interact with people, and it just makes you stand still for a moment and just
Great,
think.
great, thank you.
Yeah, so that was
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not to go on and on about it, but I also, I think fiction is also part of the historical record.
yeah,
That part of what we are doing as novelists, ideally, is sort of recording what it was like to be alive then,
yeah.
in ways that aren't quite so apparent from histories and biographies, as much as we need those too. If you wanted to know about 19th century Russia, you would read histories and biographies, and also Tolstoy and Gogol, and all
Yeah.
the people whose sort of job it is to say, okay, it was like this, it felt like this to these people, and I mean, you never know, but those are the hopes.
Maybe in 100 years they'll teach a university course about COVID and about books written during the period, and your book will be part of the syllabus.
We'll see. Well, we'll see. I won't see, but
Me neither. I mean, 100 years is
oh
maybe
no,
a
you'll
little
be
bit
fine.
too
I can
deep,
tell
but
you'll be fine on that. I will be. Well, I will be cryogenically frozen, so they can thaw me out for the course. And then
great. As I said, do we have any questions from the audience? I think up
please,
front here, John.
yes.
Could you could you guess what a translator makes per word in the Netherlands?
Oh, I couldn't, but I can tell you. Do you know?
Yes, I do. What do you think?
Oh, I'm not even going to guess, but I'm sure it's shocking.
It's 6 to 8 cents per word, which is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, 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 yeah.
I'm not going to translate any one of your books.
Okay, don't. I mean,
Michael, thanks for your nice book. I wanted to go to this translation part. You say you translate what you have in mind to words. Is this maybe what Laurie Anderson meant when she's saying language is a virus? I can't translate that.
language is a virus. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I love Laurie Anderson. Um, I can only imagine she meant that language, when it's working, sort of invades our systems. Um, I prefer to think that she didn't really mean the sort of very negative connotation of virus, but that it's a transforming agent, like it can cross the blood-brain barrier. That is my hope because I love Laurie Anderson. Yeah, 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 yeah. Right, right. It was not any comparison to actual viruses. Yeah, yeah. But no, I think yeah, yeah. That's my sense of that line. We could call her up. I think I've got her number. That'd be kind of a Laurie, I'm calling from Rotterdam. We have a question. Thank you.
One last question then, and then I think we can move on.
Thank you for writing this wonderful book. You were talking about that literature shows us something about the history, but also implies perspectives on the future. So, what would you think that we as readers take with us on our reflections on the future? after reading your book?
Yeah. That is a great question. I mean, I think if novels are part of the historical record, part of what we're recording is the future we expected, which in retrospect is hardly ever the future that actually happened. So I think part of what a book is meant to do is sort of set down, oh, back in 2024, we thought this was going to happen. Because I don't have anything to teach anybody. I'm writing for people who are smarter than I am. I don't have ideas that I don't think my readers have. My hope regarding the future and anything is that I'm sort of standing next to readers and saying, well, we all kind of know this, and I'm going to write it down because I'm out of my mind and I spend my whole life alone in a room writing this stuff down. But you know what I mean? It's important to me to feel like I'm writing for my peers, and I hope that although we move to different worlds through a book, we also are all living in the same world, and that all the writers I love are in one way or another telling all of our stories, just set in different places. Yeah, the future, here it comes. Look out.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
It was wonderful having you here. Do you want to sign?
I would be happy to, sure.
It's perfect. Then we'll move on to that, I think.
I just want to say one last thing quickly. I love doing this. I love seeing the people who read. Even if you came here by mistake and I thought it was some other writer, because it's a very abstract thing to do. It's a little like putting a message into a bottle and throwing it into the ocean and hoping somebody finds it. And I suspect we all know this already, but I want to make sure we do, that it's really meaningful to a writer, and some of you may be writers too, to just see the people for whom the books are meant. And thank you for being here and being the people for whom the books are meant. It was
Well, John. Thanks for it was so when it was gonna come here. You are partially, you are where